Hey everybody, this video is part of our full-length The Onside Kick podcast. You can find that on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes. You can pretty much find it anywhere, so we don't care where you listen. Just stick around and check it out.
But Sean, we got to move on into our next topic, and we are going to be talking about Christian McCaffrey and the Carolina Panthers. And the reason why I bring this story up is because today on 670 The Score here in Chicago, there was a former NFL scout. His name is Greg Gabriel, was on 670 The Score, and basically he said he was told that if McCaffrey gets to the Panthers, which look at any mock draft, and McCaffrey is going to get to the Panthers, that he gets nabbed by Carolina. So this coincides with the story that was on Bleacher Report last week, that apparently McCaffrey was told by an NFL team that if you are on the board, we will take you.
But wasn't that a team in the teens? So now that moves up to the 8.
I think the team that I thought it was the Redskins.
That's
who I thought it was.
I think the Saints were even in play as well.
That's who I thought it was.
There's a lot of different teams that could have went from the Eagles as well.
But apparently the Panthers, who Jonathan Stewart is set to be a free agent, not so in the near distant future he is.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you this. Should the Panthers at number 8 take Christian McCaffrey?
See, I look at the Panthers and I looked at their needs, and they're a team that I think they could go any way. And I think that getting a guy who can really change your offense in McCaffrey could be a smart pick. But the thing I want to ask is Leonard Fournette still on the board? Because if he is, then hell no, they should not be drafting Christian McCaffrey. You should be going with Leonard Fournette. I mean, first off, he fits your system kind of like Jonathan Stewart. If you want to have similar backs, I mean, you look at the backs that the Carolina Panthers have. They've had bigger backs. They've had bulkier backs. You look at Jonathan Stewart. I think D'Angelo Williams is the one that would count.
That's what I mean. I was going to say D'Angelo Williams was kind of like the lightweight compared to Jonathan Stewart.
But who stayed around? Jonathan Stewart stayed around. Fozzie Whitaker's a guy who's kind of smaller and more built. Mike Tolbert, they got the bowling ball there. So I would think that Leonard Fournette would fit their system more, especially if you pairing a guy with Leonard Fournette's size and his speed, and then pairing that next to Cam Newton with his size and speed. That's the most dangerous read option I've ever heard of, with two guys that are both like 6. I think Cam's 6'5", and then and Fournette's like 6 foot, but he's 240. Cam's got to be around that same size. I mean, that might be the most dynamic and most bruising read option we've ever seen. I don't think you pass up a guy like Leonard Fournette if you are the Panthers. If Fournette's not there and McCaffrey's still there, I could see it, and I think they might be. I think they might go to that direction if Fournette's off the board.
Well, and when you say Fournette, is he still there? The only team above Carolina that I could see going Fournette would be the Jaguars at 4,
or the Jets.
The Jets, I think, have more pressing issues, and they won't go.
They do.
Leonard Fournette. I think it's either cornerback or quarterback for the Jets at their 6th overall pick. But to me, when I think of, because you brought it up with Fournette and McCaffrey, 2 different backs. And the thing that I think of is maybe because Fournette is so much like Jonathan Stewart, if you're looking at it as Jonathan Stewart, when his contract's up, is going to walk, then fine, go Leonard Fournette.
But Jonathan Stewart's old too.
Yeah, but go Leonard Fournette in that case because, like you said, he's the same kind of back, can replace him. Fournette is. If you're thinking we need a back that we want to use in a 2 running back system like we had with Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, then I could see how Christian McCaffrey might work, because to me he's more of a receiving back. He's that smaller back. You can either put him in the slot too as a wide receiver out there. Yeah. And the thing that like Christian McCaffrey might be used not just as a running back but as an offensive weapon, because we look at this Panther team, they need running back, but what else do they need? They need guys who can catch the not just wide receivers, guys who can catch the fucking ball without dropping it.
No, and I think that's a point that I was going to bring up too, is because you look at, if McCaffrey's not in the backfield, he can still be flexed out.
Yep.
And that's something where, you did lose speed.
You lost Ted Ginn.
You lost speed in Ted Ginn. So you can at least throw him out in the slot, maybe, at least hide some of Benjamin's ability to, Benjamin's not the quickest wide receiver.
Healthy.
Yeah, he's not the quickest wide receiver even when healthy. So, putting a guy like McCaffrey next to him to at least take some coverage off him, I think that might be a smart idea. So if you do want to go with the duality of McCaffrey, then that makes sense to me. But I still look at Leonard Fournette, and this is kind of like the Myles Garrett situation, where when healthy, Leonard Fournette is the best player, at least at his position. I know people are in love with Joe Mixon. I know people like McCaffrey because of his ability to catch out of the backfield and his shiftiness. But I look at Leonard Fournette, and you see this guy. I mean, 240, 6 feet. But he's also fast. I mean, he is a guy that can just go. And there was the 2 or 4 runs I think he had against Ole Miss where he finally came back, ran for 250 yards on like 10 carries. I mean, he is so explosive, and we haven't seen a back like that in a while. Yes, we saw Zeke, but Zeke was more of a smaller runner, ran lower to the ground, where Fournette's a big guy. I mean, this guy can just mow through defenses when he gets a hole. So I look at Fournette. He also might be able to do more because this Carolina Panther offensive line isn't like the Cowboys. I mean, there's going to be some times where he might need to shake off tacklers. I think with his bigger body, he might be able to do that compared to McCaffrey.
And I was going to bring that up. You mentioned the offensive line. That's virtually, to me, their number one need.
Yeah, but there's no guard or tackle you can take this early.
It's one of those things where, really, to me, the only tackle I might think about that early, if I'm the Panthers, is Ryan Ramczyk. But like you said, and I was going to get to it, was you're not going to take a tackle that early. Most of the tackles that I have going are in the late first round of things. But the thing that could get interesting, and this is all depending on kind of what we talked about in the first segment, bleeding into this one, whatever happens ahead of Carolina, because one of their other top needs, in my opinion, is defensive end. If Solomon Thomas is there, if a Jonathan Allen is there, maybe because a guy who will most likely be there in a Derek Barnett, I know what the Barnett one might be like, well, still, they'd probably take McCaffrey over him because they said they'd take McCaffrey. But if Solomon Thomas or Jonathan Allen fall to you at 8, do you still go, nope, we said we're taking McCaffrey, and that's who we're going to take? I think you'd be stupid to pass up either of those guys for McCaffrey.
I think you go with best player available. And I think with Jonathan Allen's concerns over his arthritis and over his shoulder, I think that McCaffrey might have been able to jump him in some teams' eyes. And you also look at, at least the Carolina defense. They have guys who have been struggled to stay healthy. I mean, Kuechly, as fantastic as he is, he's a guy that deals with concussion issues a lot. He's a guy that's, is on the field as much as he's willingly able to. You look at a guy like Thomas Davis. That guy always was tearing his ACL. I mean, there's players on this Carolina defense that are getting injured consistently. So they might go away from a guy like Jonathan Allen who's suffered injuries, who's dealt with injury concerns before. So that's why I might see McCaffrey jumping over him. That's why I also might see Fournette, falling behind him because
he has the injury concerns.
He has the injury concerns that plagued him in his last year at LSU, even in his sophomore year at LSU. So I think that McCaffrey, he's been able to stay healthy at least, and I think that might play a big reason into why they might be considering him. But still, I look at this, and if I see a player like Leonard Fournette still on the board, I don't think you pass him up. I think that McCaffrey wouldn't be a bad pick. I don't think it would be a reach or anything by that means. I still think it would be a quality pick, but I think you're leaving a lot on the table if you pass up a guy like Leonard Fournette. If you're drafting in the same position, if you're going to go on defense, then that might be understandable, fit your needs better, because that Panthers defense was not good, especially when Kuechly was out. If you're trying to fit a need on the defense, that's understandable. But if you're going best player available and it's Fournette or McCaffrey, you got to go with Leonard Fournette, because this guy is just so bruising but so quick, and he's a phenomenal running back to watch.
I agree with you in the sense, if I had to rank the running back prospects, Fournette would be my number one running back, no question asked. Kind of like how Garrett's the number one pick, no question asked. But there's a part of me that looks at this, and I think it's kind of like maybe you want to go, the fit might seem nicer with McCaffrey. Like I said, we already have that bigger back in Jonathan Stewart. But there's also the part of me, every single time I've mocked a running back to the Panthers, who has it been, Sean?
Leonard Fournette.
It's been Leonard Fournette, because my mindset has always been you are drafting a running back to eventually take over, because are you really going to re-sign Jonathan Stewart after his contract? I believe after this year, it's either this year or the year after, that's his last year. And he's up.
And as of recording this right now, I mean, Jonathan Stewart's 30 years old. We know what happens with running backs when they hit that 30-year-old mark. I mean, a guy like Marshawn Lynch, 31 years old. I mean, I think barely any, I think maybe one player recently over the age of 31 has rushed for over 1,000 yards. Probably Frank Gore, because that guy doesn't stop. I mean, that's a concern about it. When teams are signing a guy like Adrian Peterson or Marshawn Lynch is their age, especially Jonathan Stewart, a guy that's always taken carries, a guy that's been fairly healthy throughout his career, a guy that has been able to be on the field at least for Carolina. I think that's why they went with Stewart instead of getting rid of Williams and keeping Stewart is because of his health. But still, I mean, he's 30 years old. He's hitting that plateau. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for a replacement. I just think that replacement should be Leonard Fournette. I wouldn't be shocked if they go McCaffrey because of what you mentioned with his ability to flex out. I think that's the biggest thing for McCaffrey too is his ability to not only be in the backfield, not only to catch passes out of the backfield, not only to take handoffs, but to flex out. And then also he's a dangerous punt returner and kick returner. We saw that. I think that was the Rose Bowl 2 years ago or a year ago. He was phenomenal in that situation.
It was 2 years because he skipped the bowl game this year.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I mean, he was phenomenal in that Rose Bowl. Putting up like 200 all-purpose yards. I mean, he was fantastic. So again, I think that you look at losing Ted Ginn, losing what he brought on the kick return, punt return, and his being a deep threat. I can see McCaffrey playing in there. So again, going back to the question, should they? No. If Fournette's on the board, would I be surprised? No. And I think that it wouldn't be a terrible pick because again, I think McCaffrey does bring something that Leonard Fournette might leave desired in that pass catching ability and being able to be more of a threat on other places than just receiving handoffs and coming out of the backfield.
Well, I mean, you bring up that Rose Bowl game. That's when we got that moment from the fan in the post game interview behind McCaffrey. I can't even remember what he said. I just remember his face like, yeah, Heisman or something about the Heisman. Yeah. It was like, shut the fuck up, man.
He finished third that year, right?
He finished third that year. But the thing that, like, in my closing argument for this, because I feel like we're getting to that, is you go one of two ways. If you're going to go the route of we want Jonathan Stewart to be back one and we want a complimentary back, but we don't want that to be Fozzie Whitaker, go with a Christian McCaffrey. If you want the guy that is eventually going to replace Jonathan Stewart, you go at Fournette.
Well, I think McCaffrey could still be a guy who could replace Jonathan Stewart because then again, I mean, you look at running back. That's a position that you could even address in the 4th or 5th round and find a guy like Jordan Howard. So I don't know if you're drafting McCaffrey just to be the. I think you draft McCaffrey if you want that threat right away, that dual threat between Stewart and McCaffrey.
Fournette, if you want it to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think with McCaffrey, I think Jonathan, if you draft Fournette, he's the guy right away, and Stewart becomes a complementary piece where Stewart would be the main back, McCaffrey would be that complementary back because he could do so much. It doesn't need to be the backfield.
And just the last thing I want to throw out there is if McCaffrey gets snabbed at 8, because let's be honest, there's no team above 8 that's thinking about taking Christian McCaffrey. If he gets grabbed by Carolina at the 8 spot, there are 2 teams in my mind that are vastly affected by that. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Redskins. Way I see it is if McCaffrey goes at 8, Fournette becomes an Eagle, and then the Redskins go, well, we're not going to take Dalvin Cook. Well, they could go Dalvin Cook, or they'll say, screw it, we're going to fix our defense.
I think the most interesting thing would be if McCaffrey or Fournette go 8, then the Eagles decide they want a running back as well, and the Redskins decide they want to go running back. So we say Fournette, McCaffrey, and Cook's off the board. Joe Mixon's high on a lot of draft boards. I know a lot of our fans on Twitter because of being the social media manager. I know you've probably seen it as well. A lot of people have him as their first or second back. I don't know if NFL scouts are taking that as an advantage or if these guys are just saying talent-wise, but if they do see that talent and they're kind of pushing away the off-field concerns with Joe Mixon, that might mean Joe Mixon's the best running back available. He might go in the first round, which is a crazy thing to think about.
And that's the thing. I'll just say this because I did see, I can't remember if it was a comment or a tweet that somebody was like, well, Joe Mixon is the number 1 running back in this draft class. Have you seen Leonard Fournette run the ball? Have you seen what Sean was talking about? Did you watch the Ole Miss game? Leonard Fournette's our number 1 back. Like, I'm not saying that Joe Mixon's not good. I did say he might be a little bit overrated last week, which may be true, but let's not get it twisted. Leonard Fournette's the main and the number 1 running back in this class.
I think Joe Mixon could be a first-round talent if he didn't have the off-field concerns, but still.
Definitely didn't help.
This is what people have to realize is, yes, he might be the best talent, but you look at this, and there's a reason why a guy like I'm blanking on his name, but Tyreek Hill, when they went in the 6th round, 5th round. I mean, teams think about that. And once Tyreek Hill got noticed, people started Googling, started looking him up.
Start pulling it back up.
This is something that might affect franchises. Franchises have to take this in ability. Yes, he might be the best player available, might be the most talented player if you do think that, but NFL teams are thinking beyond just talent, and they're thinking beyond, PR nightmares. I mean, so that's something where Joe Mixon might be a fantastic talent, but he's going to be at least, Cook, McCaffrey, and Fournette are going to be off the board before Joe Mixon's taken.
You want to win football games, but you always got to remember the NFL and really all sports, it's just a business. It's all about the Benjamins in the end. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think about Christian McCaffrey. Should he go to the Panthers? Panther fans, I want to hear from you. I haven't said it yet. You got to claw up in this comment section. Let us know if you want Christian McCaffrey or if you want them to go somewhere else. But before I close the podcast off, Sean wants to say something.
Speaking of cash money, who's going to get paid more, Leonard Fournette or Christian McCaffrey? Who's going to go first? Is it going to be McCaffrey or is it going to be Fournette?
I would go Fournette over McCaffrey, but we'll see on Thursday.
I think Fournette's going to end up going higher.
We'll see on Thursday. But thank you guys for checking out this special edition of the Onside Kick, the 2 little short topics that we have. If you're on YouTube, it was great to see your faces again. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, or Stitcher, thank you for giving us the download and the listen today. But as I always say, have a good day, everybody.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And don't worry, there is plenty more where that came from. You guys can check it out right over here. Click that video, start watching it, and just stick around on Most Valuable Podcasts.